Good morning and welcome to Sunday Supplement. Liverpool have been beaten. Watford won 3-0 against Jurgen Klopp's side, and we'll be discussing what impact that result and the manner of it may have on the rest of Liverpool's season. It's Carabao Cup final day, but what chance do massive underdogs Aston Villa stand against Manchester City, who won away at Real Madrid on Wednesday? And ahead of a key game at Goodison Park, we'll discuss how Everton and Manchester United have evolved since Everton's thumping win in that fixture last season. Plus, in part 5 of today's show, we'll be asking, is there a regional bias in print football journalism, or is it a myth that all sports editors support London teams? No regional bias in the studio today with London's finest, John Cross. You told us to introduce him like that. Chief football writer at The Mirror, Daily Mail reporter in the North West, Dominic King, and Midlands guru for The Telegraph, John Percy, making his debut today. You are very welcome.
Morning.
I've given you the big build-up, haven't I? Don't forget, you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup, and the best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes or so. Well, I tell you, the papers this morning have been an absolute treat to read. It is joyful having an hour and a half or so just to read back pages with no small children at your ankles, by the way. I recommend you going out and buying one today because there's so much great content across all of the papers. The Mail have Klopp shock, as you might expect, after the 3-0 Watford win, ending Liverpool's invincible run. They have an interview with Nuno, as a couple of the papers have as well. Really good insight there. The Mirror, Rashford could be fit for the Euros, and so near, so far, after Ismail Assar almost completed a hat-trick, which would have been 4-0. Extraordinary in that game. Martin Lipson here in The Sun, end of the line. All the controversy about VAR and the forensic analysis of offsides, which has been winding people up quite a lot. Looks as though IFAB are going to allow the Premier League to have a thicker line when it comes to judging offside. So that'll be interesting. We'll talk about that at the top of part 3. And in the Sunday Times, there is a great deal to be getting your eyes around on that. Of course, Sarr helping to beat Liverpool after 422 days and 44 matches in the Premier League. Rashford fit for the Euros. And in the Telegraph, there's a rather large page pull-out on Beth England scoring twice to earn Chelsea their first ever League Cup. That was played at Nottingham Forest yesterday. And Jill Scott, unfinished business before she retires. That's ahead of the She Believes Cup, which is a huge tournament for Phil Neville's England side. Wow, we have got a lot to fit in, so I'm going to stop talking about newspapers and start talking to you, Dom King, because you were at that match yesterday at Vicarage Road, which I'm sure you put a fiver on that result, didn't you? But where... You put a tenner. But where would you place the line between Watford being absolutely outstanding and Liverpool being shocking on the day?
It's always hard in a story like this to know which way to go, and I think it's very, very important to emphasise just how good Watford were yesterday. You could see in the first half how well drilled they were, how well set up. The atmosphere was fantastic. The stadium was alive all the way through. So they need to be given credit for a result that can possibly transform their season, see them get out of relegation trouble. Nigel Pearson's done wonders since he's been in, given how bad of a situation they were in at the beginning of the season. Liverpool just had a horrendous day, probably the worst they've had since they played Tottenham at Wembley in October 2017. No complaints about it. Jurgen Klopp never had any quibbles. Virgil van Dijk said it was unacceptable, and they just slipped so far below the standards that they set that Watford ran all over them.
Oh, after that initial upturn in form under Nigel Pearson, they've gone several games without a win. That came out of the blue, but you know Nigel Pearson pretty well from his time at Leicester, don't you? What was he like then?
He was fantastic. I mean, obviously you had to get to know him. Obviously, from the press conferences you see, he's in the zone. You know, he's like Nuno at Wolves. You know, he just sometimes just wants to talk football. Doesn't like questions where he's put on the spot. But he's a terrific manager. What he did at Leicester with the final great escape, obviously got them promoted from League One all the way. I think it was 7 wins out of 9 in the final season. Obviously, he's been talking about that this week, doing that again with Watford. And I mean, him and Craig Shakespeare, I mean, they're just a great little double out. They dovetail really well together on the training ground, and just the way they bounce off each other. So, I mean, they've given themselves a great chance, haven't they? It's just, you know, the results yesterday were just fascinating for the relegation fight, and obviously Norwich on Friday night as well.
Yeah, you say fascinating. Aston Villa say absolutely horrific, but we'll come on to them in the next part. But were you shocked by what you saw, John?
Yeah, I was really. I mean, first half, I did think it was a bit of a stalemate. Really, it wasn't much of a game, was it? But the difference I think that you see in Watford is that with Nigel Pearson, I mean, they've been through some managers this season. We shouldn't forget that. I'm not massively in favour of Watford's revolving door policy on managers. I think that strikes me as a club that's not that well run. You can't argue otherwise. But they just stay in the Premier League. And as soon as they got Nigel Pearson, I thought, well, here's one that's inspirational. It's a good managerial appointment because they're well drilled, they're well put together, aren't they? And I just felt that, having seen Liverpool quite a lot recently, I just felt they weren't quite firing, they weren't quite at the top of their game, and they're always vulnerable. And it was interesting to hear Klopp talk afterwards about having the team being under some sort of burden, because everyone talks about these records. Beating Man City's, record of 18 consecutive wins set a couple of years ago. Catching Arsenal's Invincibles record of 49 games unbeaten. Going the season unbeaten to win the title. And I just think those sort of things do weigh on players' minds. He can talk all day about it and deny it, and players probably say the same thing. Liverpool is a fantastic place to be. Sort of Melwood is absolutely buzzing. The players are really sort of kind of happy there. It's an amazing place. But I just think that burden of history just seems to have weighed on them. They're the best team by a million miles in the country. They're absolutely fabulous to watch. But it just feels like they've had their little dip in the last few weeks. That coupled with the winter break, the sort of the controversy around that. And I just think they came to Watford yesterday and met up against a really good, well-drilled Watford team. And that was the obstacle a little bit too far. But I just think Liverpool, we'll look back, and it's a shame they sort of kind of can't create more history. But they will create history of sorts, because they'll beat the points tally, I'm sure. They'll set records left, right and centre. This team is such a great team. But it almost feels like, with this defeat, they'll hit the reset button, go again, and basically hit those heights again. There's nothing to worry about. I think they could easily win on Tuesday night. I still think they'll turn around that Atletico Madrid game. They'll win it. They'll win the title by an absolute country mile.
Privately, I think there'll be a sense of relief as well. I think, obviously they wanted to extend the record, but, we're not going to be asking them about that anymore. They've lost this game. They can just get on with it now and win the league. They've lost the game. You're looking at the league table, it's 22 points. I mean, let's just put that into perspective. There's no whiff of a title race here, is there, unless it's going to be the most unspectacular collapse ever. But I think privately there'll be some sort of relief where we've lost a game, we don't have to be asked about it again, we can just keep going now and just get the job done.
John said it was a shame they won't have the Invincibles tag. Not if you're an Arsenal supporter. Hey, they're all over social media last night. Where do we build the statue outside the Emirates to Ismail Assar? They were rather chuffed about that. So they should enjoy it as well. But, John mentioned there, Dom, the winter break and the fact they haven't been at their intense best since then. Do you think it's because of the impact of the break, for whatever reason, maybe that they mentally got to reset? Do you think it's anything to do with Jordan Henderson being out and what they lack from his drive and his intensity in midfield, and of course injuries at the back?
Absolutely. Well, Joe Gomez missed yesterday. It's only a little tight hamstring. It's nothing too serious. He should be back within the week. They missed the captain 100% yesterday. He's been the player of the season for Liverpool. I know others get the headlines like Salah, Mane, Firmino, Van Dijk. People talk about the fullbacks. The person who's been driving them forward over the last 2-3 months has been Jordan Henderson. I think he could win PFA Player of the Year. He's been that good. They missed him. There was a huge void yesterday without him. In terms of how they've been since the winter break, they've definitely been a beat or two slower. There's just at Norwich they sort of managed the game like almost shadow boxing, and they had a little bit too much wiliness to get the better of Norwich. They were scruffy against West Ham in parts, but never really felt they were going to lose that game. But then yesterday, the tone was set early on. Trent Alexander-Arnold tried to play a ball back, and he put it straight out of play to Alisson, clipped it out, and it was just those little bits of detail, the standards that they've set, they weren't there. But as the lads have said, it's nothing fatal, and that's why I think it was important to emphasised just how well Watford did. They took advantage, and that day was as much about them winning yesterday as it was Liverpool losing.
Yeah, and Watford's so up for it with the physical battle as well, which it looked as though Liverpool perhaps weren't quite up for. And early clattering of Trent Alexander-Arnold, was that maybe in his head? And it's just sort of game absolutely set for Troy Deeney, wasn't it?
He loved that game, didn't he? I mean, Lovren and Van Dijk. I mean, they won't face many games like that. I mean, this is the old throwback, isn't it? Nigel loves the strikers to be, imposing and physical. That's the sort of game that was tailor-made for them, wasn't it? It was just fantastic to watch, just real old-school game.
I felt sorry for this weekend was that Norwich get a big result Friday night.
Exactly, yeah.
Everyone else wins this weekend. It's almost negated. I mean, I was just trying to make the point the other night on Twitter, basically, just saying Norwich, I can't remember a
fantastic team.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I can't
How are
believe
they
they're
bottom of the table?
Yeah.
They are the best.
They're brilliant.
Don't take this the wrong way, but they are the best bottom of the table team.
They must be fed up
in the
with hearing
Premier
it as
League.
well.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, they play really good football. They're attractive to watch. They've got good players, terrific fullbacks.
Yeah.
Ben Godfrey, I think, is a good centre back. Campbell's obviously making a name for himself.
Buendia,
Pookie,
fantastic.
absolutely, he was great the other night. Buendia, wasn't he? And so you kind of you feel for them a bit. But I just think that it's a hell of a race down the bottom. So it almost feels like the Premier League title race has become a turn-off, really, because Liverpool are so good, they're embarrassing everyone else. And by the way, I think, my vote 100% goes to Henderson, being sort of kind of streets ahead as a leader and as a player, fabulous, player of the year. And they've embarrassed everyone else. But it feels like the race now for top four, or top five it could be, couldn't it, basically, for the Champions League places and the relegation scrap, is the most exciting race of all. And that's no way detrimental to Liverpool, because it's a massive tribute to Liverpool, just of how good they have been. I mean, you mentioned the Invincibles. It shows the sheer genius of great teams of the past. To win the title unbeaten is an amazing achievement, and that's obviously why Arsenal and, Arsenal fans take in so much pride on that, and Arsene Wenger deserves so much credit on that. But this Liverpool team, for me, I mean, football evolves, and, at the moment, I thought 2 years ago, Man City, no one will ever reach those heights again. Guardiola's setting new barriers, new parallels, really. I mean, he's an absolute genius for me, Guardiola, in the way that he got Man City to play. And then Liverpool this season have surpassed it. Absolutely astonishing.
It's like PlayStation football.
It's crazy.
The results. It's like the kids are playing and, win. It's just not been seen before.
It's not been fair.
No, it's like when you see those sequences of W's, it's almost like on the PlayStation, the kids churn out results like that. It's just been remarkable, and that's why there is such a shock that it's come to an end.
It is incredible, especially when you think how many variables during football matches can mean that by far the better team on the day doesn't always win and can draw a game. And yet they've managed to, until now, win every single game bar one. They have ridden their luck on occasions.
We've spoken
their
about
opponents will say that.
They have, yeah.
The Villa game in last year. I think Villa were 1-0 up with 87, 88. Liverpool just kept going. It was relentless, and they won 2-1. Mane scored, didn't he? The second goal.
Mane and Robertson equalised.
Yeah, and it was just incredible just to watch this force of nature, this red machine, just power towards victory. And Villa just had no answer.
That is one of the things people talk about, the quality of the football they play. It's the sort of mentality, that refusal to even contemplate that they're going to lose. It all stems back to how they beat Barcelona last year. In fact, it probably even goes further with when they put the sequence of wins together to put the pressure on Manchester City in the race for the title. What they've done over the last year has been remarkable. It was like 109 points from 111.
Not good enough.
I know, terrible.
But it does embarrass the rest of the league, I have to say. It does embarrass the rest of the league.
Does it embarrass though, or do you just have to pull your hands up sometime and
there's
say,
a bit of both,
you're watching
Dom.
genius?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of both. We are watching the best team, I think, in sort of the Premier League era, because every team, as I say, football evolves and they're taking it to a whole new level. But I do think, as well as, it's not a criticism of Liverpool in any way, but as brilliant as they have been, for other teams not to have responded. I've been disappointed in City's title defence. I mean, last season was a thrilling Premier League simply because that toe-to-toe, we've never seen anything like it. And that was incredible. In any other year, Liverpool win it by an absolute street then.
I think those two are still the best by a country mile.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, Liverpool way ahead. But Man City, I mean, Leicester failed to beat them twice. I think they're short of them at the moment. A few additions. maybe they could get closer. But those two, streets ahead of everyone else, I think.
We'll talk about Man City in part two, but just on Liverpool for a minute. I mean, the mental strength that they've had to get to this stage of the season, to march, for goodness sake, having only dropped points once before now. Was that slightly their undoing yesterday in terms of they can't possibly be mentally at that level every single week in the Premier League? They are human beings.
Yeah, I think there's also that sort of loneliness of being in front, where you haven't got the pressure of somebody applying, snapping away at your heels to try and force a mistake out of you. They've been in front for so long that perhaps they just lost a little bit of concentration. But what they've done has just been, I know we've said it before, but it has just been remarkable.
They almost get damned with faint praise, I think. It almost gets boring. And it's like, how can such a run be considered, you know, you almost forget about it, oh, Liverpool have won again. But to have that many points at this stage of the season is incredible.
They need to make sure the season doesn't peter out now, because if they do go out the FA Cup at Chelsea and then, you know, they're 1-0 down against Atletico Madrid, they could have a couple of months with nothing riding on those fixtures. It'll be a bit of a victory tour of, you know, trophy parade around the country, wouldn't it, if they're not careful?
It might sound strange to see, but it could be anticlimactic if they've got the season, the title wrapped up by the first week of April. You almost wonder whether they need a second trophy to really show the dominance in the domestic season. But you know, that's why I think the FA Cup game on Tuesday night is so important.
I think they'll turn around Atletico. Really do. I don't.
That'll be some night, that, won't it?
It will be some night, and I do think on nights like that, the Cup really does become a sort of that mythical force, really, when it does sort of kind of suck the ball in. And I've no doubt about it. I do think that Atletico are really well drilled, great defensive, but I still think Liverpool do that. And
let's just finish on Watford, because we have to give them even more credit.
Absolutely.
I know everybody is, but I mean, the fact they lost Gerard Deulofeu early on, fascinating seeing Sarr as well. Summer signing as a 21-year-old as he was then, from Rennes. Sabri Lamouchi, the Forest manager, was his boss. And he wasn't really played. 17 minutes of Premier League football is given by Javi Gracia. And apparently that was his undoing. That's why they sacked him, because they weren't playing the £30 million signing.
Yeah.
How good do you reckon he could be?
He looks a real prospect, doesn't he? I mean, there's been a lot of talk around him for years. I think we did an interview with him, Jason Bird did an interview with him, and I think Watford wanted him to play before his interview, because they wanted him to show what he could do. And obviously last night, where's he been? I think it was tremendous. But, you know, they're a really good, well-drilled team, Watford. I mean, I like the back four, the way they play at the back. I like Decore. You know, I think he's a great player. They've got some good players now. Now they're at the bottom. Capu, obviously, they're at the bottom three, and that, like you said yesterday, for Villa and Brighton, bad, but for everyone else, fantastic.
Oh, I just love staring at the relegation places. It's as a neutral, it's wonderful to watch, isn't it? It's so close.
Not
Watford just out. No, exactly. Watford just out the bottom four on goal difference. Bournemouth just in it after their 2-2 draw against Chelsea, and then Villa 2 points off it. Norwich have a fighting chance, 6 points off safety. It's going to be fun, isn't it? Now, coming back in part two, we'll be discussing the Carabao Cup final and whether Aston Villa can pull off a shock against Manchester City. Join us in a second. Welcome to part two of Sunday Supplement. Now we're going to talk Aston Villa and Manchester City now, bearing in mind it's the Carabao Cup final later on today at Wembley. David Walsh in the Sunday Times today talks about Man City's fabulous win at Real Madrid in the week, which John was at. This Real Madrid team may be ordinary, but there should be no doubt that Pep Guardiola delivered a managerial masterclass last Wednesday night. And then he includes quotes in there in which Pep says, no, it wasn't a managerial masterclass at all. I didn't really do anything, as in, don't give me credit when we won, as in when we lose, it's very fine margins either way. Quite sweet of him to play it down when he could have taken all the glory, couldn't he? You were there, John.
Yeah, he was magnanimous really about it afterwards, simply because it is fine margins, isn't it, really? I mean, I still don't know. We sat there trying to work out in the first half, what is this formation? And I still don't quite work it out, because you had Gabriel Jesus on the left, at times playing left back. You had Bernardo Silva as a false nine. You had Kevin De Bruyne, who was superb throughout, but then linking up as almost an auxiliary forward. And then you had Aguero, the top scorer, on the bench, who was left on the bench, and Sterling as well, who was fit to start and wanted to start, basically just came on with it, sort of kind of very important, I should add, cameo role at the end. And frankly, once you go behind, and it was a comedy of errors. Rodri, sloppy in possession. Then Kyle Walker should have cleared it, and then basically Real Madrid, as David Walsh rightly points out, such an average team. They've won it 13 times, but this is so far removed from being a classic Real Madrid team that you feel this team is there for the taking. They've gone 1-0 behind, and Man City, if they mess this up, bearing in mind all the anger and frustration around the European ban, you have the Man City fans in the top corner of the ground singing their hearts out. They were magnificent throughout, but singing largely a lot of songs about UEFA and about the Champions League ban. And frankly, you think, well, they've blown this. What an opportunity. And yet the way that they came back, the catalyst was Sterling coming on with his extra injection of pace, wins the penalty. I mean, it was fantastic. They were patient, they were well-drilled, they were organised, but you also have to say they were kind of quite close to that defeat, which would have been unfair, because Man City on the night were the much the better team. They even went behind when they were dominating the game. And Guardiola was talking about kind of all the lengthy preparation that went into the tactical setup, and they got it absolutely spot on. And you feel that, Ramos, he's a comedy pantomime villain, isn't he? He pulls back, sort of Gabriel Jesus, who probably would have scored. And if it had been 3-1, then it's game over. I still think that Man City will still be strong enough. But you feel that in amidst this anger and frustration about the European ban, it is written in the stars for me that Man City will go to the Champions League final and win it. Because that's what happens in football. Everything that you can't possibly imagine, that would be the greatest irony, always is guaranteed from this point. They're good enough to do it. What I would say is that basically, defensively, Laporte going off injured again, does that raise the issue that he's really struggling? I guess it does, that he's struggling to come back from that knee injury and the knock-on effect of a hamstring now. I mean, if they can overcome that, settle the back four, this team can easily be European champions. They are that good. They've got a manager who I think bristles with frustration, in that basically even in press conferences on the Tuesday night he was asking questions, why is your record so poor in the Champions League? He's won it twice with Barcelona. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's almost like people don't count that, isn't it? We haven't done it with Bayern or City, therefore you've failed.
Crazy. I mean, he's so, he's a genius. He's one of the best managers ever in the Premier League. Man City, I think, are one of the best teams we've ever seen in the Premier League and probably ever will. And of course they can go and win it now. And I just thought that that night, with the City fans, with the City comeback, with the City determination, with Guardiola sort of, every minute detail shows you just how good City are and shows you why City can indeed win the European Cup this year.
And do you get that vibe from having dealt with them, that they are driven on that little bit more by this UEFA
Yeah,
business?
Absolutely. I mean, he denies it, and everyone says, no, that's just not true. But of course they are. They're angry, they're bitter about it. I must say, I think financial fair play is wrong, but once you introduce the rules, everyone has to abide by it. I don't like it. It will always serve up reasons why and excuses and ways around it. And I think that's wrong for football, and I think that's a shame. So I don't actually agree with FFP, because Man City have been great for the Premier League, as have Chelsea, before them. Absolutely fantastic. But I just think that it serves up the rights and wrongs. We could argue all day about it. The rules are in place. If they've broken them, they'll get punished. So, but basically, that has been such a motivation, such a driving force, and I think that will take them to, as I say, I do think they've got a great chance to go all the way, and I think, in their heart of hearts, they will be thinking, we've got to go out and show them, because what bigger embarrassment for UEFA could be for Man City, banned for 2 years, to go and win the European Cup? Be amazing.
Do you get the sense that there is so much focus on whether Pep and Man City can finally win the Champions League that perhaps his other achievements and their other achievements of winning so many trophies, the treble last season, has been slightly overshadowed?
Yeah, what they did last season, I can't believe how little coverage it got at the time. It always feels like there's something angry about Man City. I don't know whether the fans really properly enjoy what they've got at the minute. It was almost, the FA Cup final was like sort of really strange reaction afterwards, but what they did last season was amazing. Never been done in English football, winning all 3. If they win today, is that 6 of the last 8 domestic trophies? This is one of the greatest teams of all time. They're seeing football from that they'd never seen before. I worked at the Manchester Evening News when I started off, and in my career, and the team from 1968 to early 70, they were the gods. The European Cup Winners' Cup that they won, the league on the last day of the season with Bell and Summerby and Franny Lee and Neil Young and all those, and they were held as like the beacon of whatever. This team over the last 5-6 years, they're in a different stratosphere. We can talk about them like AC Milan or Real Madrid in terms of what they've done domestically, and if they got behind, if really got behind the fans and for the Champions League, they could win it. They could carry them there, and you hope that what they did in Madrid, because there's only 3 English teams now won in the Bernabeu. You hope that sort of ignites a love affair with what European football's about, because there is nothing better than winning in Europe, and they're good enough to win it. They are. They were fabulous the other night.
And they are overwhelming favourites to beat Villa today. I was astonished when I saw this, bookies odds this morning. The odds on Villa winning this match 1-0 are the same as Manchester City winning it 7-0. Both 50 to 1. That's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. What's your take on that, John?
Well, it's a massive ask, isn't it? I mean, that win in midweek was without Aguero and Sterling until he came on. So, I mean, I would assume they'd start today. They've obviously won it 2 times in a row, I think it is. I mean, obviously last year with the Kepa incident and everything, Villa have got the work cut out, haven't they? So it's a huge, daunting task for them. But, I mean, we've seen yesterday in the Premier League, these upsets can happen. Whether it can happen today, we'll have to see. I mean, I just think they're going to be too strong. With my Midlands hat firmly on my bold head, I would obviously love Villa to win, but I just can't see it today. I just think City will be too strong. And obviously Villa, the thing all season has been the goals. Can they score more than 1 or 2? And I just can't see City not scoring 1 or 2. You know,
They're brilliant at conceding goals, though, aren't they?
52. That's incredible. I mean, you go down with that, wouldn't you? 52. So that's something Dean Smith really needs to sort out.
And they've lost 3 in a row, Bournemouth, Spurs, and really the one at Southampton was a shocker, wasn't it? In terms of the nature of the defeat, the performers, there were literally no positives for the manager to come up with afterwards. And he basically accused them of downing tools and not fancying it, not showing up for the fight.
He said that they played the way out of, a few have played the way out of playing today as well, which is, Dean Smith doesn't do that. I think he's done it probably twice. A lot of the players speak about the one he did last season at Stoke away, I think it was, where at half-time they were either losing or they were playing poorly, and he got the hairdryer out and they never looked back from there. And he did it on Saturday at Southampton, and obviously hoping for a similar reaction, but that's very rare for him to, go for them like that. So if it gets a reaction, then it will have worked, won't it?
Well, if he's going to drop a load of players, it might be John Terry at centre-half then today. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Imagine Liverpool's goals for us. That'd be great. I mean, this is your piece today in the Sunday Telegraph. With a very nice picture of Dean Smith there.
Yeah,
I think he might
well
be
there.
framing that. Yeah.
A nice picture of John as well.
Is that the start of the
That's a long time ago, that one.
start
Well,
of the
your
season?
pylon picture.
Yeah, mine, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you look cracking there. You've not got your Midlands hat on there. Smith's ambition driven by family values as he aims to resurrect Villa's glory days. Now, it's well known that he's a Villa fan. Well, the sad background to this, that his dad,
heartbreaking.
Ron, is
Yeah.
suffering badly from dementia and doesn't even recognise his sons, Dave
It's heartbreaking,
and
yeah.
Dean. And he obviously wants to take the trophy back and show him, but his dad's barely able to open his eyes.
He's been in a home for 4 years now, I think. And obviously, dementia's a horrible illness. I think he's in advanced stages, and obviously Dean goes to see him a lot. I think, like he said in the piece there, I think he saw him before the playoff final, went to see him at the home, and he had a glint in his eye. Still didn't know who he was, that he was Villa manager, obviously, but there was that glint, and he just had that moment where he thought, is my dad coming back? But I think it's got worse. His eyes obviously aren't open now. No idea he's Villa manager, which Dean, fans since the age of 4, 5, 6, whatever it was, you obviously want your parent to know that you've got the dream job. He's not even aware of it. But obviously his brother Dave as well, was a really funny story there about, he was down at Southampton last week. He would have heard all the Dean chants, why is he picking him, why is he doing that? He would have heard all this from the fans. So it's a real family sort of affair with the competition. His brother will be there today as well, I expect. And Dean was saying he'd have been there if he wasn't manager. I mean, that's how tight his relationship with the club is.
He's been at previous cup finals before, hasn't he? Apart from in '96 when he was playing for Hereford and they lost the day before, and Graham Turner, the manager, said they had to come back in the next day. He was devastated.
Got
he had
tickets and everything, couldn't get in. Gutted.
What are your thoughts on Dean Smith's position at Villa? I mean, it would be a massive upset today, but we've seen those before in cup finals.
Yeah, it would be. Look, I did an interview for yesterday with Ezri Konsa, the Villa centre half, who's has a really good season in amongst the kind of the highs and lows, and the buzzword really the whole piece was about revenge. And I guess that having lost at the Etihad and then basically in between the two Leicester semi-finals, they're beaten 6-1 by Man City. I mean, that's their driving force. And you just think, how on earth can you go from two brilliant semi-final performances against Leicester into that kind of capitulation against Man City? Because as good as Man City were, Villa were poor. And I think there have been times, haven't they? I mean, even, Konsa was talking about this, basically where they've had really devastating defeats where it probably has left question marks over the manager. I think they kind of had a sort of real players get together after the Watford defeat at Vicarage Road just after Christmas. And I mean, from the outside looking in, I think that Dean Smith are doing an amazing job. He's taken them up, which is not a given. I know there's kind of, spent some money, but it's not that easy. It's really not. And he's got them to a Wembley Cup final. And yet it still seems to me that there's a bit of doubt floating around about sort of kind of Dean Smith. Is he the right man? I just think, of course he is. There's a connection there with the fans, but I'm not totally convinced that all the fans kind of would appreciate that in amidst defeats. But I just think that what he's got to get today is a reaction to that lamentable Southampton performance, because that's the point, isn't it? And I think up until this point, he's always got a reaction. And I think that's the key. So you get a reaction from a really bad day at the office and take that forward, get a better performance. That's what he's got to ask. Everyone makes Man City favourites, of course they do. But what the key for Villa here is doing themselves credit, getting a performance to be proud of.
Because people talk about them doing a Fulham, don't they? Because last season Fulham spent huge amounts of money, not necessarily on the right players for the job in hand. And Villa spent £127 million last summer, but it was slightly different, wasn't it? They didn't have many players. Was it 11 under contract?
They had 11 players out, on the books after the playoff final. They hate this doing a Fulham thing. If you mention it to them, it doesn't go down very well. But I mean, obviously they scouted all their players from sort of October that year. This was a plan A, there was a plan B, promotion or championship. So there was a cohesive strategy on what they were doing. The signings, not all of them have worked out. That's undeniable. There's some that have been really good, some have been average, some have been awful. But that, I suppose, is when you spend that money, there is always that risk, isn't there? But they had to build a new team. So it wasn't doing a Fulham, despite all the sort of comparisons. Obviously, winning the playoff final and spending loads of money. Theirs was planned, but obviously there's risks and gambles with every signing you make, isn't there? So.
And just briefly, Don, before we go to the break, we've got to talk about Jack Grealish because, I mean, the talent that he is, astonishing. Danny Murphy in the Mail on Sunday today talking about him. And there seems to be this vibe that he will go regardless of whether Villa stay up. Do you know of Manchester United, City interest?
Manchester United have been looking at him a long time, all the way through January. He was there was that link.
16-year-old, I think.
Yeah.
There was a Rio Ferdinand story, isn't there, with him meeting Rio Ferdinand when he was 16. This is before he even made a first team appearance. So there's always been that interest there. Sorry, Don.
I can't bow to that. No, he's a terrific player. I think he's been mentioned with a lot of clubs, and I remember him the FA Cup semi-final 4 years ago, 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
Leading Liverpool in merry dance, and he certainly won't be barred by the occasion. I think if Villa are going to do something, it's just imperative that he shines.
Fantastic.
Do you think he'll go?
You put me on the spot here. I mean, I think obviously leaving Villa's going to be a huge wrench for him. If they go down, it's a fait accompli, and there's no argument there. It's whether he wants to go to that next level at this stage of his career, because obviously he's a fantastic player. Does he want to be hanging around this part of the table? I mean, obviously Villa could sign 3 players in the summer that transform them if they stay up. That could be worth staying. But I just think, I'm sorry, the Villa fans are going to hate me for this. If you're a Man United chairman or manager, you build a team around him. If you want to jazz the team up, start again. You get Jack Grealish, build your team around him. There's no better way to spark it up than him, is there?
No, I agree with you. He's a super player. He's good. I mean, he's got to be an England call-up. And for me, the way he's playing, he starts the Euros.
Yeah. Fascinating. Great talent he has. Let's see what he can do this afternoon. You're lucky enough, you'll be there, won't you?
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, coming up in part 3, we'll be looking at the evolution of Everton and Manchester United ahead of a big game at Goodison Park and discussing what Nuno has revealed in the papers this morning. Welcome back to Sunday Supplement. We have in the studio John Cross, who's been here a few times before. So too has Dom King, and making his debut today, our Villa man. Giving you such a big build-up, haven't we? John Percy, it's great to have you with us. We'll be talking more about Midlands football in due course. But looking at some of the back pages today, quite clearly dominated by that wonderful, if you're a Watford or an Arsenal fan, 3-0 victory over Liverpool. Rashford fit for the Euros. What else would you like to see? Oh, a bit more on that. Nuno on the Fame game. We'll come and talk about Nuno in a few moments and what he's doing and what he has revealed. And there was something in the Telegraph. There's, I can't find so many newspapers here. Anyway, let me show you Graham Souness as well. In the Sunday Times, talking about Ancelotti could lead Everton to a surprise tilt at Champions League qualification. And that player in the Telegraph who dislocated a kneecap and then bashed it back in several times. Luke Edwards has done a big piece on that. I did that once, bashed it back in, never played again. Was told it was a terrible idea. Anyway, that's why you stuck with me. So let's talk about VAR because there's been an IFAB meeting in Belfast yesterday, and basically Pierluigi Collina, who is the chair of FIFA's referees committee, he was asked whether the Premier League could use thicker lines in judging offsides. Nothing to prevent this from happening. John, is that a good idea? Will that solve all this forensic analysis debate?
To a degree, I just think it's shifting the goalpost somewhat. I mean, I'm up for anything that frankly changes and improves our use of VAR, because what has driven me to frustration and distraction. I'm a huge advocate of VAR. We can't run away from it. We have to introduce it as there, and it should be used well. Is the English and Premier League arrogance in that we think we are so much better than everyone else that we can do it in a different way. And Collina and Ellery both so cutting, I think, in some of the remarks that they sort of said about the way that we don't use pitch-side monitors. I mean, it's laughably bad. About our failure to use pitch-side monitors. And also, I don't think we ever get over the fact that it's running quite nice and smoothly, thank you very much, in the Champions League and even now in the Europa League as well. But the key thing for me is that it doesn't seem to take so much time when it's in the Champions League. And are we imagining that? Probably partly, yes. But the key reason for me is that the fans in the stadium, when they can see on a contentious decision the referee going over to the pitch-side monitor, they can actually see what's going on. They realise the decision is up for grabs. And it's all about the fan in the stadium, because that feeds the whole atmosphere when you can celebrate, if you can celebrate. And I just think it's ludicrous the way that we've introduced it and the arrogance that we have. It stems really, I think, from a poor leadership from Mike Riley, who, I mean, you know, I'm sure, Jackie, you went as well, but there was some briefing done, wasn't there, Premier League, which was incredibly useful as a journalist to go and feed off and learn from, in which we were basically told that the referees are encouraged not to go and consult the monitors, to rely and trust in the VAR. And then, 6-7 weeks later, after one of the Premier League stakeholder meetings, which I always go to on a monthly basis, you've got Mike Riley standing outside the London hotel, which they stood and said, no, of course we don't, tell them not to go and check the monitors. Well, actually you do. And with leadership like that, how on earth are you going to make VAR work? But what fascinates me is that I was talking to someone at a club last weekend, and a sort of, high up who goes to the Premier League meetings. I sort of said, what about Mike Riley then? And they're not on a witch hunt to get out Mike Riley. They just want a better VAR. And sooner or later, we've just got to accept that Mike Riley's had a stinker with this. And then basically in football, we do look for a scapegoat, and we do look for someone, if they haven't done it very well, Mike Riley hasn't introduced it very well, I'm sorry, bring someone else in. Howard Webb has done it fantastically well in the MLS. He runs like a dream. I've been over there, seen Howard Webb. Get him over, get him back. Basically, we've let far too many good referees go, and the standard of refereeing is poor, so poor that we've got poor referees being the VAR. And people say, oh, the VAR should be the one-size-fits-all solution. Well, it's not that, because you've got a poor standard of referee being the VAR on occasion. It's so wrong, it's so poor, and I just hope that this weekend and the IFAB comments coming out will in some way shame the Premier League into improving it.
Yeah, another quote was from David Ellery, the IFAB technical director. He acknowledged that VAR has taken away the benefit of the doubt from the attacking team, saying, "We didn't envisage this would happen." Well, they have to do something about it. They're trying to do something about it. Do you see it as a leadership issue, or do you see it as a communication issue, perhaps? Or both?
I'm just confused by the whole thing. It's ruined the season. It's absolutely ruined the season. I was led to believe that VAR was introduced to make play more exciting, to bring more goals into the game, and these lines, they're like graphs on an exercise book, and the little tiny you're penalising toes and whatever. That's not VAR, because I thought it was for clear and obvious mistakes. No linesman could spot someone's toe being offside. Nobody would have ever even questioned it before. I mean, we could probably sit here and devote this whole section to bad calls that we've seen because of it, but we won't.
We can't. We've got so much to talk about.
We won't. Do you know what I mean? But it's cast a shadow over the season. It's a joy killer. You've had situations where fans don't even know whether they can celebrate.
That's what I've noticed.
The whole essence of what you go to football for, that spontaneous minute, the joy, the release, it's not there anymore, because everybody's looking around thinking, is it okay? Is it okay? Are they going to check VAR? And that to me, I think, is the biggest indictment. And I don't like the fact that we've had emails pumped out to us from the Premier League and the PGMOL saying everything's working fine. It isn't. They need to they need to come and face serious questions and discuss where it's gone wrong.
Oh, God, it's all a bit doom and gloom, isn't it? It is only the first season, though, John, isn't it? And something else they're looking to change is the concussion substitute. They're going to trial that in the Tokyo Olympics, as long as that does go ahead.
My issue with that is how long it would take.
Yeah.
Delays, more delays. I can see the logic in it.
Would it be fewer delays because they'd get them off the pitch while the concussion sub's on, rather than assessing them so long on the pitch?
I think it'll still delay the game. Obviously, I know it's the protocol, the concussion, they have to be followed, but I just think it's just going to delay the game even more. And at the moment, it's like Dom says and John, it's just stop-start all the time. And I have noticed in the last few months now, fans are looking at the screens. The players were doing it a few months ago, thinking, have we scored? Now the fans are doing it. And that's when it's going. You're really losing it. We're losing a grip on the game. We've got to sort it out.
OK, well, let's move on to Everton and Manchester United, which is being played today, or yesterday, if you're listening on the treadmill tomorrow morning on the podcast, as a lot of people tell me they do. But 4-0, absolute thumping for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's United last season at Goodison Park. I mean, one of those where Ollie said there were zero positives at the end of it. But just explain from an Everton perspective, which is one of your clubs that you cover, how things have changed under Carlo Ancelotti. You did a great piece on it and what he's like.
So that game you talk about, I felt then that Everton could be credible European challengers, and then once again the recruitment in the summer never went well. Players that they brought in haven't made an impact, and it's obviously led to Marco Silva losing his job in December. I was unsure initially about Ancelotti, whether he had the appetite for a rebuild, whether he was the right fit for what Everton needed. I actually doubted whether Everton could get the signing over the line. The fact that they've done, fabulous. It's probably the best appointment they've made in 35 years. He's given the supporters belief. He's brought a reputation. You just mentioned Carlo Ancelotti's name and you're talking about football royalty. And in the 2 months that he's been in, you can see the improvements that he's made. He's got a clear way of wanting to play. But he's just got that personal touch. And one of the sort of stories that I was told early on over Christmas about him, he called the players together and he was talking to them about Christmas parties, and he was quite serious, saying, I don't know what you're going to be drinking over this Christmas period, you know, I want you to know that the manager likes a glass of red wine. And he just sort of disarmed everybody, put everybody at ease, and he's just got that real sort of common touch about him. He's a you know, his achievements speak for themselves. You know, I don't have to talk about that, but he's exactly what Everton needed. He's exactly what Everton needed, and hopefully this is going to be the catalyst for something good for them.
And just tell us about that story about the team meeting where he made a point and a player hadn't realised he'd even been a player.
Yeah, well, it was all around Andre Gomez's injury, and Andre Gomez had come back into training, and they were debating about whether he should start last week at Arsenal, and Ancelotti had said to him, you know, I'd been through this, I had a year out, and I thought the best thing to do was just come back and play straight away. And I'll keep the player's name nameless. We turned around to Ancelotti and said, "You played? you were a player?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, I did actually. I have played for a couple of clubs that you might have heard of, but you know,
European Cup couple of times.
Yeah, but see, it's the way he dealt with that as well. You know, he's just a really good man and a wonderful football operator.
Best eyebrows in football, without doubt.
And in terms of Manchester United, reasons to be rather more optimistic now than, you know, this debate we've had in the last few weeks. It's been all very negative. It's all been Ollie, terrible, what track records he ever had. But actually signs now that he is building something.
Yeah.
The recruitment of Bruno Fernandes having helped.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, you know, you like to think that's a good one. I mean, my only scepticism about that is they probably started the January window not thinking we're going to sign Bruno Fernandes. So I hope it works out for them, but you want to see some long-term planning on it. But he does look a really good player from this point forward. And, I mean, it was interesting to hear Ole Gunnar Solskjaer talking ahead of this game, saying that basically the Everton game was perhaps the low point. And, you know, that game, and, you know, we've come such a long way from there. But I would actually trace it back to, 5 or 6 games ago, where they lose at home to Burnley, and you're thinking, where's this going? You know, surely you can't trust Solskjaer with it. And I just think that since then we've had this lift. They could easily finish 5th place and get into the Champions League. I think they could easily then, you know, they're still in the FA Cup, aren't they? They've got this emotional game with Wayne Rooney on Thursday, and yeah, they're on the up. And I think last summer they actually probably didn't get the credit they deserve for signing 3 British players for 150 million quid. That's better. But I've still got this lingering doubt over whether Solskjaer, at his core, has got enough experience, enough quality to steer a ship as good and as big as Man United. Or basically, would he have got the job fundamentally if he hadn't been a former Man United player? Well, he wouldn't have, would he? I mean, that's the issue for me. And I don't, you know...
You could argue they know him better, so they know his qualities
I guess. But then if you know your qualities, you look at Cardiff and what happened there. And so you would have some doubts. For me, he's still got it all to prove. And if he does that, then it's a brilliant story. It's a great story in the history of Man United, of course it is. And he could do all of those things, win the FA Cup and get back in the Champions League. And maybe I'm sort of, you know, on the back of a decent run, decent sort of, you know, signing. I've still got doubts, though, I must say.
I'm not convinced about them. And it's not even about Solskjaer. It goes deeper than that. Bruno Fernandes is the case in point. If they had the recruitment structure behind the scenes in order, he gets signed on the 1st of January. They knew what the asking price was. They knew what he could have done for them. Just go and get the deal done. You're Manchester United. You've got all the money in the world. Do it. Yeah. Why are they haggling? Why are they, you know, going back and forth and just wasting time? This one thing really leapt out at me this week was the quote from Richard Arnold, talking about Igalo trending on Twitter and how done Trump's impeachment and Brexit. People were only he was only trending because people thought it was,
just shows where the priorities are.
Yeah, I just have absolute doubts about them with everything that's going on above Solskjaer, because you keep hearing that they'll get a director of football. That game against Everton last year, I'd heard that they had somebody in place to be the director of football. We're in March now. It's still nothing. Are they saying what they think people want to hear? I don't know. I just think there's a long way for them to go back to the standards that they were.
Guy wins a few games, still looking up, and but no, not for you lot in here. Sorry, Nuno, we're going to have to talk about you in the next part. What do you mean you're not watching? Of course he's watching. We will talk about him, and also in part 4, we'll be talking about Arsenal after their shock Europa League exit and what Arteta is doing there to turn things around after the rather unpleasant Emery era. See you in a sec. Welcome back to Goals on Sunday. No, that's up next, Sunday supplement. But Goals on Sunday is next. That's at 11:30. And that's with Cammy and Alex. Good morning to both.
Morning. We have plenty coming up on today's show, don't we, Cammy?
Yeah, no problems with VAR this week?
No?
No, not at all. But the rest of Europe are saying that the way we're implementing VAR, we have to do it differently next season and go in the same way as they are.
Oh, it is interesting. And we have Sean Gota and Andy Townsend joining us on the
Carabao
sofa.
Cup final today.
It's a
Who will
huge
win?
day.
Could Villa cause an upset?
I don't know, Cammy, I don't know. But do join us at 11:30.
Love a bit of Goals on Sunday. Now, Nuno has done a sit-down interview, quite an extended one, with 3 reporters, with Rob Draper of the Mail on Sunday, with Sam Wallace of the Telegraph, and with Jonathan Northcroft in the Times. I'll take your pick. They're all brilliant, and they all pick out different kind of quotes. But it's a lot of insight from a manager who doesn't normally appear, at least, to like doing the media. It's quite a lot of it. Here we go. Some really fascinating quotes. Like John Percy here is somebody who has dealt with Nuno a lot. Now, tell us whether you think his public persona of not really liking the media very much is true or not, in your opinion.
The story is that he was harshly done by, in Spain, I think, by the press over there. Whether this is true or not, but that's the stuff of legend, that he felt he was harshly treated. So he's not really in the mood, especially after games, pre-press conferences. Like we said with Pearson earlier, he's in the zone, just wants to talk about, just get in there and out, as quick as he can. But these interviews that he's done this week, I've done a few with him myself, where they call them a round-table interview, and you totally see a different side to him. We've had an hour and a half with him as well. I remember before the start of the season when we were doing something on the Europa League, it took him a while to warm up. He just wasn't going for the sort of, are you going to finish top 4? And then I think we asked him, you went from 3-5-2 to 3-4-3 last season. His eyes lit up. He was putting our hands in. He was just going for it. He likes an interesting question. You have to. It's a challenge to journalists. I'm not saying I'm the best inquisitor, but if you think your question through, make it a bit different, he seems to respond a bit better. But in that environment, he's a different guy, and he's a fascinating guy. He's got so many stories. And he has got
an African island.
Yeah, so, obviously,
Rush Hour had 5 cars.
Yeah, he's got a sense of humour. He laughs at himself, and the side you see of him after games where he just wants to get out of there couldn't be further removed from how he actually is. I'm not saying I know him at all. I'm not saying I've got his number or anything, but he is a different guy to how you would see him after a game. Spurs today, you'll see him and you'll just think, oh, but he is a fascinating guy.
Yeah, it's the only football figure in the Midlands whose number you don't have, I think. So that's a challenge for you for the next time you come on the show. You have a slightly different impression of him, is that right?
Well, I do, listen, I do and I don't. I mean, it was quite interesting, really, in Jonathan Northcroft's piece, which was, the most wacky intro ever about walking naked in the beach, but that was quite funny. But
almost naked.
Absolutely. He then refers to he goes into Jonathan's piece about kind of why he doesn't like the normal press conference setup because of the, as he calls it, stupid questions. And I get that. I just think that when we see Nuno on Sky being interviewed before or after a game, you see this kind of different persona. He's quite smiley, he's quite charming and chatty. And then for someone like me who then sees him in a post-match press conference, he can be quite rude and he can be quite sort of snarly, unhappy, doesn't suffer fools gladly. And I guess that does play into this persona. And we were talking at just off air just before about kind of why hasn't he gone to a bigger club. I mean, he was linked with Arsenal, but I have to say, I know for an absolute fact that Arsenal were never interested in him. Largely, one of the key reasons was, I mean, it's difficult always to get another manager from another club mid-season, but one of the key reasons was his communication, and having suffered, you know, with Unai Emery and being so poor with the media profile is important to certain clubs, and that's what basically, rightly or wrongly, I mean, a lot of people will say, well, why on earth are they interested in what he does in press conferences? It's all about results, because Wolves have been sensational. I mean, they're not just, you know, incredibly high in the table, doing well in the Europa League. They are brilliant to watch, aren't they? They are engaging, they're energetic, they're fabulous. I love watching Wolves. They've got some super players. They've clearly got a manager. I mean, you know, did a piece with Conor Coley last season. He was saying he's the best manager I've ever worked with. He's absolutely number one. He's fabulous to work with. He's a brilliant manager. And I get all that, but I just think media-wise, maybe, you know, it's great to see these pieces, but that maybe his media profile is holding him back. And it's ironic, really, because I have to say, Wolves have got one of the best press operations in the Premier League. I mean, it's super communication staff, really, you know, welcoming, friendly, and yet here they are, the manager who clearly doesn't get unleashed like this very often. But brilliant reads, don't get me wrong, but I do think that kind of public persona, the press profile, is in many ways holding him back, and a lot of viewers will go, well, that's nonsense, and it probably is.
Well, I think
it's
ridiculous.
A bit of an issue
I mean,
for clubs.
He's not Claude Puel, with the greatest respect to him. At Leicester, that was just was never going to work. He couldn't communicate. Nothing to do with the language barrier. He just couldn't communicate, whether he was English or whatever. Nuno can communicate. But I'm sorry, John, I just think that Arsenal thing is ridiculous.
It's his public image around the world.
Well,
they
were hurt so bad. In fairness,
Wolves fans
in the context,
don't want him to
they
go.
were hurt so badly about Emery.
Yeah, I can
Emery
understand
was
that.
So poor.
But 2.5 years, you look at his track record,
amazing.
as Jackie knows, absolutely unbelievable. How can you not look at him?
Won the Championship in the first season, Europa League straight away.
Why would you go from Wolves to Arsenal now?
Exactly, that's
Why
another
would you?
point, yeah.
I think Wolves. Sorry. No, I just think they're on a real upward trajectory. I think they could win the Europa League. I think they're a proper team. I think only for the fact that they had the early start and having to get through the qualifiers, they could probably be in the top four. I think they're one of the top four teams in the country.
They started the season quite slowly, but they'd also had a trip to China immediately before the mid-July start.
I think he's fabulous, and you know, I wouldn't be leaving Wolves in a hurry.
And we've had this conversation a million times, haven't we, at Molineux? If you're a Wolves fan, obviously I'm not, you are. If you're a Wolves fan, it's the time of your life. You know, this is a period in their history where you've just got to enjoy it as much as you can. You know, the nightmare scenario, Nuno won't be there forever. Some of their players might not be there forever, but they just this time and space at the moment. It's just a magic carpet ride. It's just unbelievable what's happened there.
He took over in the 15th in the Championship as well, under Paul Lambert. But the interesting thing, one of the many interesting pieces that's come out of those pieces today, he explains his philosophy on a small squad, why he likes it so small. He says, you can only give a high percentage of minutes to 14 or 15 players, he said. So a small squad has everybody involved. A large squad promotes a disconnect of players not involved, and then you have a clash between best friends because you have to leave out a handful of players who train on their own for a few days while the others go away. And he said he'd rather avoid conflict and then invest money in injury prevention, which is something that, touch wood for them, they've done pretty well. But now let's move on to Arsenal. As you mentioned, the time under Emery wasn't great. I think in one of your pieces I read, he said the training ground was a toxic environment under him, and it's something that Arteta has sorted out. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. By the way, I have to hasten to add, I'm only putting Arsenal's point of view. I'm not necessarily, I completely agree with the Nuno thing. But look, I think the biggest single factor in Unai Emery and when basically they realised we've got to act is for years and years and years, they had a wonderful environment around the training ground. Every you know, it was a good, fun place to be. For players, it was a joy to turn up for work. They had some of the long-serving staff under Wenger were magnificent, you know, real characters, and it was a great place to go and train. You'd enjoy it, and I just think in under Emery it slowly went and dropped off a cliff. It was horrible. It wasn't a nice environment. Players didn't like the manager. They weren't working for the manager, but also it's just this negativity. You
Did they
could
not like him as a
literally
person,
feel
or they
the
didn't like his
atmosphere.
managerial style?
Yeah, I don't think they got him really. I don't, you know, he communicated so poorly, you know, that basically I just don't think they got him. And, you know, Arteta came from a time as a player where the training ground was vibrant. It was good. It was a fun place to be. Honestly, you'd have a laugh as a player, and it's not all about laughing. But anyone will tell you in football that if you try, you know, if you're happy in your environment, in your skin, basically, then you'll train well. And if you train well, you play well. And honestly, it's just been like night and day for the training ground, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, it's just about, you know, sort of really being distant and kind of always kind of being in his own office. I mean, his staff would, you know, get involved a little bit more, but he wouldn't communicate that well with the staff. Arteta comes in and it's immediately an uplift because he engages well with players, and I just think that, you know, he's got the players on side. They can see that he's got a tactical outlook, that they're well drilled. For Emery, you didn't know what the identity of the team was. With Arteta, you do now. I mean, he's still got to turn over some players, hasn't he? Because the squad needs some surgery. I mean, I think actually the squad isn't all that bad, to be honest. It should be doing better.
Will that change in the summer?
Of course. I mean, look at the 2 goals the other night. I mean, how can you I mean, why doesn't Luis on the second one in particular just put his head on it? I mean, it's just crazy. And what's Lino do?
2 against Everton last week weren't great either.
Oh, it's crazy.
Calvert-Lewin's first one was...
Yeah.
Was
I mean, Lino, I make a case that I think he's amongst the top maybe best 3 or 5 keepers in the Premier League judged on performances this season. You know, I mean, Alisson's clearly, for my money, the best, the standout one. Everyone else is sort of pales in significance, but... You know, then you've got Edison, Rui Patricio, I think is very, very good. Schmeichel, absolutely. And Lino's in that sort of second bracket, if you like. And, you know, he had a bit of a nightmare the other night, and he had a bit of a nightmare. So I guess it's
Will
kind
Mustafi
of...
go?
Well, I mean, if there's one player that you'd say has benefited more than anyone else and epitomises the difference that Arteta has made... Mustafi was told that you can use this week to go and, you know, find another club in August. I mean, it was just, you're out the door. You're not part of my plans. Emery openly talks about it in press conferences. And now, fast forward, Arteta has got him playing like the player that played for Germany. I mean, he's got German caps. He looks, I mean, I don't know. I still think you'd probably want to do better, you know, and Arsenal fans would say we still couldn't have an upgrade. But what a difference he's made, and that's man management for you. That's why I think Arteta is a really good guy for Arsenal. He's making a difference, and despite the devastating effect, because it is from a financial point of view as well. I think that they're facing a 4th year out the Champions League, and then the black hole of losing the money that they gained 40 million quid last year for getting to the Europa League final. So everyone, you know, sort of kind of downgrades the Europa League as compared to the Champions League. It does earn you money. I think if you take it seriously, as Wolves, and credit to them, Man United as well, do, then you can go and win it and get a passport into the Champions League. Why wouldn't you go and win it? And, you know, it was a bad night the other night, but, you know, I do think it's difficult trying times for Arsenal, especially if they're not, you know, if they don't get European football next year.
Yeah, it is strange, you know, when you click on a Premier League table on a website and you sort of have a subconscious placing of a team, don't you? It is still weird when you go to Arsenal, you kind of go top 4 and then you're looking down at 10th with 37 points, and 4th place at the moment, Chelsea have 45. So they'll be hoping that maybe 5th place opens up for Champions League of 41 as things stand where United are. But anyway, at least they're on the right track, as John thinks. Now, coming up in the final part, we're going to be talking about West Bromwich Albion with John. We're going to be talking about Nottingham Forest as well. And is there a regional bias in football journalism? We hear it a lot, the London-centric football desk. Is that true, or is it a complete myth? Talk about that in a second. This is the final part on Sunday Supplement. In a moment, we'll be asking the question about whether there's a regional bias in football print reporting. But before we come on to that, let's be regionally biased in favour of the Midlands, seeing as we've got you on, John. And We haven't talked too much about West Brom this season. They're top of the Championship. There's so much more talk about Leeds, who've now won 4 in a row, including a 4-0 win over Hull yesterday. But West Brom, having lost at home yesterday against a player who's a Wolves fan, scoring the winner, and a manager who's a Wolves legend in Paul Cook. But where do you place them this season in terms of how well they've done?
I think they'll do it. I think they've got Slaven Bilic has done a great job. I think West Brom, whenever they've done well, they've always had an affinity with the manager and the fans. And Bilic has got that. He's energised the place. Been playing some great football. I think 6 games unbeaten before yesterday. They've had a few of these games where they've lost at home to teams they should beat. But some of the football they've been playing is brilliant. They've got Pereira's been a fantastic signing for them. Livermore reinvented. Robson Kanu. He's people that you probably written off a little bit as Premier League players. They've really come to the fore.
And, your microphone, unfortunately, is playing up at the moment, so we'll try and sort that out. Yeah, mine's still working okay. There we go. Poor you. Have you seen a lot of West Brom and especially the promotion race in the Championship? It is fascinating for us neutrals, isn't it?
Yeah, just watching from afar. I mean, I know someone who knows Slaven quite well, and he's the work that he's done has been absolutely fantastic. There's just that looking at the table, and I know yesterday was a bit of a blip, but they're going to come up. I know they did a great bit of business to get the kid in from West Ham on loan, and he's transformed the season. He's been a real influential player, but it'd be good to see them back in the Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a good story. I mean, one thing I would say is obviously yesterday, but you look at West Brom's bench yesterday, and you look at it, and it regularly has kind of 3, 4 players with Premier League experience. Yesterday you've got Charlie Austin on. I think Bartley came on in the first half, didn't he? And it's basically you've got quality there throughout. I just think also they play really good football, and I think it's I think they'll be absolutely. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll sort of go up quite comfortably in the end. And I think they're always a credit to the Premier League, to be honest.
There's 5 points now between Leeds United and Fulham in third place. Fulham having won 2-0 yesterday. It is a brilliant race, and Nottingham Forest out 10 points off the top, but they won't care too much about that. They are 9 points rather off automatic promotion Forest, and Sabri Lamouchi having done a great job in there this season. But let's move on now to the bias.
I'm looking forward to this bit.
There's a clear bias against Midlands clubs, because we were trying to talk about them then, and John Percy's microphone was sabotaged by somebody either from the north or the south, which means he's muted. But you're all London football fans on your desk, aren't you? And these northern guys try to phone in. They can't get a story on, can they?
He's quite funny about that, because blimey, I've been, painful to say this actually, but I've been at the Mirror 22 years, and when I first went onto the Mirror, basically the whole back bench, which we use in newspaper terms, was basically the hierarchy. So from the sports editor down to whoever it might be, the sort of deputy, the sort of number 3, number 4, and that's how we always describe it. I mean, it was a little bit of a gag and a bit of a joke at the time. They were all West Ham fans, and I can't really sort of kind of deny it. I mean, you look at I used to laugh sometimes, probably because my match that I was doing didn't get much of a show. Basically, I used to joke it turned into the New Recorder, and then we had sort of kind of the years of the Watford Observer when the sports editor was a Watford fan. We got Mike Walters, I don't think hides it sort of thing as such, and so he'll be loving today, and rightly so. But I just think that it's changed, and it's the Northwest is the football capital of the Premier League, and indeed England. There's no argument with that. As chief football writer, I spend my life on the M6 going to the Northwest. I wish it was London biased, because I do more London games, but I'm often dictated what's on Sky on a Sunday, for me. But it's just not like that anymore, I don't think. And I think if you get a small a story about a London player, then it just would never get the same projection as a Man United story. Does
Jack Grealish, now that you're back in the game, welcome back, John.
Hi,
does Jack Grealish get as much coverage as an Aston Villa player as if he were a Man United, Liverpool or Arsenal player?
Well, I would say Grealish in the Midlands, people have been aware of him for 4 or 5 years. And I think it's only really arguably now that he's got more of a sort of national profile. And I think that's maybe, there is a little bit of bias there, not from maybe London-based reporters, but just what they're going on about, these people in the Midlands, about this Jack Grealish. You know, and obviously the Leicester story blew it all apart. I mean, you were there most weeks, weren't you? Then, you know,
best story in the Premier League.
Brilliant story, and everyone was camped at the the King Power Stadium, to get the handshake off Claudio Ranieri, and I think that was it.
Very, very briefly, is there a bias, yes or no?
I don't think so, no. If people talk about Liverpool, they say there's too much Liverpool in the papers at the minute, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but
You've no problem.
22 years, you're not doing bad for only being 28, are you?
Thank you. So you're fine in the Northwest, but the Midlands doesn't get enough of a look in. We knew that already. You can catch up on the show, on the podcast and on demand. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week. I won't be here. I'll be here the following week, but it's on at 10 o'clock. Bye for now.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.